The miracles grew louder. Crowds pressed in, not just with hope, but with expectation. They had seen the blind receive sight, the lame walk, the unclean made whole. Wherever Jesus went, the desperate followed, and the desperate are always the most honest. They came barefoot, broken, crawling if they had to, and he welcomed them all, touched them all, healed them all. But behind every miracle, a shadow stretched long. Jesus knew the clock was ticking. Each healing, each crowd fed, each parable spoken in the open, it all drew him closer to the moment no one expected, and few would understand. The glory they saw was real, but it wasn't the end. It was the doorway to something harder, darker, deeper. And still, he kept walking. One day, standing among his disciples, Jesus asked a question that sliced through the noise. "Who do people say that I am?" Some said Elijah. Others said John the Baptist raised from the dead. Still others whispered of prophets long gone. But then came the real question. "But who do you say I am?" Peter, always first to speak, breathed the truth. "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus smiled, not because he needed validation, but because something had finally broken through. The veil had started to tear. But then he said something strange, that the Son of Man would suffer, that he would be rejected, that he would die and rise. Peter rebuked him. "No, Lord, that shall never happen to you." Peter's words came from love, an earnest desire to protect his teacher, his friend. But they also carried a deeper temptation, one Jesus had already faced. Jesus turned and said words no one forgot. "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." It wasn't Peter himself Jesus was rebuking. It was the voice behind the words, the echo of that wilderness whisper that once told him to seize power without pain, glory without sacrifice. Peter didn't know it, but in that moment, he was offering Jesus a shortcut around the cross. And any road that avoids love's deepest cost is no road at all. The cost of glory had been revealed. The path forward would not be paved with gold and crowns, but with blood and wood. And still, he kept walking. He led them to a mountain. Not all of them, just Peter, James, and John. They didn't know what was coming. They thought it might be prayer, rest, a quiet moment with the rabbi. What they got was the veil ripped open. Jesus was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun. His clothes became dazzling white. And beside him stood Moses and Elijah, speaking with him, not of conquest, but of his departure, his death. Peter, overwhelmed, offered to build tents, to stay there forever. But even in the glory, the cross lingered. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice thundered, just like it had at the Jordan. "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." They fell face down in fear. When they looked up, it was only Jesus. The moment passed, but they had seen, and nothing would ever be the same. He told them to keep it secret, for now. But the revelation had come. The glory had been revealed. And now, the road would narrow. He began to speak more openly, not just to his disciples, but to the crowds. Not just in parables, but plainly. He told them that the way forward was not triumph in the way they imagined it. It was surrender, sacrifice. He began to speak of being handed over, of suffering, of dying. They didn't understand. Some turned away. Others followed more closely, desperate to make sense of it. But one thing became clear. This Messiah was not going to fit into their expectations. Peter wrestled with it. The same mouth that had declared Jesus to be the Christ now struggled to accept a Messiah who would bleed. The idea of Jesus' suffering felt like failure, not fulfillment. Peter had pictured a throne, not a tomb. James and John whispered questions at night. Why would he walk toward pain? Why isn't he using his power to stop this? Their hands still trembled from the mountain light, but their minds couldn't reconcile glory with grief. Even Judas became more withdrawn. He watched Jesus more carefully now, his gaze no longer full of wonder, but calculation. There was a storm in his soul, and it was beginning to stir. And the others? They kept walking, but their hearts ached with unspoken confusion. They had seen the dead raised, demons cast out, thousands fed with crumbs. And yet, here he was, speaking of suffering like it was destiny. In the quiet moments around the fire, when the crowds had gone and sleep was near, the disciples would glance at one another, searching for answers. Did anyone really understand where this road was leading? Did they dare ask? Not long after, Jesus received word. Lazarus, his friend, was sick. He waited, not because he didn't care, but because the miracle would speak louder through death than it would through healing. By the time he arrived, Lazarus had been in the tomb 4 days. Mary and Martha wept. The crowd murmured, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying?" Jesus wept too, not just for the pain of his friends, but for the pain of a world that still didn't understand. And then, standing before the tomb, he said, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man walked. The miracle shook everything. It was no longer just words and parables. Death itself had been reversed. And the leaders, those who already hated him, could take no more. From that moment on, they plotted not just to arrest him, but to kill him. And not just him, Lazarus too. Because resurrection was more dangerous than revolution. And still, he kept walking. He knew what the miracle had cost him. 6 days before Passover, Jesus arrived in Bethany. Martha served. Lazarus reclined at the table, and Mary did something no one expected. She broke a jar of expensive perfume, worth a year's wages, and poured it on his feet. She wiped them with her hair. The fragrance filled the room. Judas protested. "Why this waste?" Jesus answered, "Leave her alone. She has done this for my burial." The room fell silent. In that moment, Mary's act became prophecy. Her devotion pierced the awkwardness of the room. Her tears baptized his feet. She gave what she had, while she still could. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others tried to justify Judas's words. But Jesus saw her, truly saw her, and he declared it holy. The disciples didn't yet understand the weight of her worship, but Jesus did. He was already carrying the smell of burial on his skin. He wasn't speaking in parables anymore. He had told them what would happen. He had revealed his glory. He had spoken of the cost, and he had shown them a love that didn't retreat in the face of death. He had laid out the path for anyone willing to follow. "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." It wasn't a metaphor anymore. It was a summons. And still, he kept walking, toward Jerusalem, toward betrayal, toward the cross. But not as a victim, as a lamb prepared. Each step heavy with divine intention, each moment soaked in eternal mercy. He wasn't just walking toward death. He was walking toward you, because glory is not found in escape. It's found in obedience. And love, real love, never flinches in the face of pain. This is the Jesus who did not turn away. And this is the part of the story where eternity began to tremble. So we ask ourselves now, what do we do with a Savior like this? Do we follow him only in the light? only in the moments of multiplication and healing and joy? Or do we follow him through the shadowed valley, through the unthinkable road, through the scandal of sacrifice? He does not ask us to understand it all. He only asks us to trust him, to believe that love is worth the cost, to believe that glory still walks beside us when it looks like all is lost, to keep walking when the crowds leave, when the cheers turn to silence, when the road leads to something that feels like death, because on the other side of surrender is resurrection. And still, he keeps walking.